Welcome to an episode of Lib Let Die with me, Mark Oaten, and there is no Lembit because he is at the Reform Party conference at the moment, and you'll be hearing separately from him.
Hold the front page, Mark. I'm back from the Reform UK conference, and all is well. Thanks for starting without me, but I will tell you all about that conference in a little while. Well, what do you think we should talk about first?
Every media commentator is using that famous Harold Wilson quote, "A week is a long time in politics." And certainly this time, when we were last broadcasting, there was no sense that there was going to be any issues around a reshuffle. Quite the opposite. Keir Starmer had just meddled around with a few internal appointments.
Well, a week's a long time in politics. Just a few days has been a long time in politics. I'd forgotten how intense party conferences are. I'm absolutely exhausted from it, but glad to be back. And maybe Reform UK had a rather better few days than Angela Rayner. I know where you're going with this, Mark.
Then, of course, came stamp duty. Not the discussion about whether it's going to be changed by Rachel Reeves in the budget in November, but whether or not Angela Rayner had paid the right amount. Now, look, where do I stand on this issue? Firstly, I absolutely hate this quick knee-jerk call for politicians to have to resign. And I felt that it was one of Kemi Badenoch's worst appearances in Parliament when she was constantly calling for Angela Rayner to be dismissed.
Position.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know the whole House will want to send our condolences to the family of our former colleague, David Warburton. I also welcome the fact that the Deputy Prime Minister has referred herself to the ethics advisor. She has admitted she underpaid tax. So why is she still in office?
In relation to the Deputy Prime Minister, she has explained her personal circumstances in detail. She's gone over and above in setting out the details, including Mr. Speaker, yesterday afternoon, asking a court to lift a confidentiality order in relation to her own son. I know from speaking at length with the Deputy Prime Minister just how difficult that decision was for her and her family. But she did it to ensure that all information is in the public domain. She has now referred herself to the independent advisor. That is the right thing to do. But I can be clear, I am very proud to sit alongside a Deputy Prime Minister who is building 1.5 million homes, who is bringing the biggest upgrade to workers' rights in a generation, and who's come from a working class background to be Deputy Prime Minister of this country. Mr. Speaker, on the question of borrowing costs, they have risen across the world, as the Leader of the Opposition well knows. We are driving them down by getting debt down. That is hardwired into our fiscal rules. Those fiscal rules are non-negotiable. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to take lectures on the economy from the party opposite, who crashed the economy, mortgages went through the roof, and a record fall in living standards.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure we would have heard all that sympathy if it was a Conservative Deputy Prime Minister who was being attacked. I remember when the Prime Minister said that tax evasion is a criminal offence and should be treated as all other fraud. If he had a backbone, he would sack her.
Interestingly enough, the Tories would say perhaps it was one of her better weeks because she did capture the headlines. I thought it was interesting how, by contrast, Ed Davey chose to step back and not call for resignation, and also Nigel Farage seemed to hold back at that point. But it's a sign of the desperation, in my view, of Kemi Badenoch that she had to quickly do that classic knee-jerk, let's call for resignation.
You know, I'm no great supporter of Ed Davey's leadership. I don't think he's cutting it there. But on this occasion, yeah, I think he was reasonable. With one declared interest there, Ed Davey and Angela Rayner both have children with disabilities. So I think he does relate in that sense. I think more interesting is Nigel Farage, because there was a kind of open goal there, but he didn't take it. In fact, last week he even said that he didn't begrudge politicians who actually make themselves independently wealthy. He's obviously one of those people. I think that's one of the big differences here, though. Kemi Badenoch, in my view, did come across as somewhat superficial. I just don't think it was that good a week, even for her this time. But for Farage and Davey, the most important thing for me is that they weren't being hypocrites. That's, I think, really the problem here. I'll say more about that later.
Now, It was quite right that no resignation happened, or that Starmer decided not to push Rayner until the outcome of that report. The report itself clearly left no room for manoeuvre. It said that despite the fact that perhaps the intentions were not deliberate, she had broke the ministerial code. And so that resignation, at least in the terms of the way in which the Prime Minister received that report, had to happen.
I don't think it necessarily did need to happen, Mark. I'll tell you why. If Angela Rayner had simply said, look, no one's perfect, I've never criticised anyone else for this kind of thing, and it looks bad, but I'm genuinely sorry, she might just about have got away with it. But two problems there. One, Mark, is that Keir Starmer kept talking about sleaze and the Tories being unprincipled, but he was nothing compared to the amount of venom and hate that Angela Rayner has been relentlessly throwing at the Conservatives, especially before she became the Deputy Prime Minister. I think that's the problem here for me. It's not that Angela Rayner did a really terrible, terrible thing, and viewers will disagree. Some people think she just has to go, but it's because she set herself up by not being better at these things than anybody else. I think maybe that's one reason Nigel Farage has been a bit more circumspect, because it's not relevant to him. In fact, he said recently he wasn't going to share his tax details, perfectly legitimate position. He doesn't want to get involved in that mire.
Personally, I still don't get it. I don't understand it. I think that Angela Rayner should not have had to have resigned. It was clearly not something which was being done deliberately. She wasn't trying to cheat anybody out of tax. As she herself has said, her personal arrangements, the way in which she has legal documentation around her son and her property, have made it not a clear-cut case.
This is perhaps where I slightly disagree with you. I think that she didn't really need to resign if she played it differently in the past. Now, I think you're being more generous than me in terms of her intentions, but that doesn't matter. I'm not actually that interested in the internals of what she did, what advice she got, whether her lawyers gave her that advice or whatever. I'm interested in the fact that she has been relentlessly negative and personal about other people. I was actually on television with her talking about Hancock making money outside Parliament, and she was so venomous. When I pointed out in her register of interest she'd got benefits from outside Parliament, she went crazy, absolutely crazy. I thought, you're heading for a fall here at some point. I didn't think it would be like this, but I thought at some point she'd be called out for those double standards. And I thought it would actually harm the reputation of Labour. I thought they might begin to look a bit like no better than the Tories. As it turns out, it was a bit more dramatic than that.
She did take legal advice. She listened to what the advice was from her lawyers, and she went along with what they said. Now, look, we've all had those legal letters where it says, well, maybe you need to get a little bit more expert advice on this issue, and we've all ignored that. We've taken at face value the first advice that we've been given. And Angela Rayner's only mistake was not to go further, perhaps, than many others of us would, and double check that everything she was doing was right.
Okay, you're kind of second guessing what was really going on, and you seem to be accepting her side of the story. All right, well, maybe we don't need to get bogged down in this, because I'm not going to phone her and you're not going to phone her and find out. But still, I just don't think that's the core issue. I'll just say it one more time. It's because she slammed other people for what she's been doing, pretty much.
Given that she resigned, Keir Starmer was left with a set of bad headlines. And I think he did relatively well to suddenly bring forward his reshuffle to try and take the heat out of the Rayner situation. The reshuffle in itself, though, was frankly what it says in the name. He was just shuffling some of the pieces around.
Absolutely. It's literally just rejigging the same people, and the same people aren't performing.
And this is a problem. Where is the big talent to come in? Where are some of those colourful characters that we're all looking for now in politics to actually come in and take some of those big jobs around cabinet? Instead, he moved the very, very uninspiring David Lammy, who frankly has been very silent and quiet as a foreign secretary, into the role of Deputy Prime Minister. And then he moved Yvette Cooper, as we all know now, to become Foreign Secretary. And in doing so, has had a complete clear out of all of the ministers at the Home Office, trying, if he can, to distance himself from the failure to get on top of what's happened with small boats, and blame it, if you like, on Yvette Cooper and some of those other ministers on being too cautious. I don't think that washes. If Keir Starmer wanted to get a grip of this issue, it should come from him as Prime Minister. He should be giving the leadership. And I don't think changing who's at the Home Office is going to make a blind bit of difference. It has to come from him.
Though he did put a Muslim into that position, and that's interesting because the optics of that will be really provocative to a lot of people who already don't like Keir Starmer. Now, that's not a reason to not to appoint her, but she could cause trouble with assisted suicide, which apparently loads of Labour people want. I'm not keen on it. I used to be, but I'm not now. But she, I think, might resist it. So I wonder how that's going to play out. Has he caused himself a problem with his backbenchers by putting a Home Secretary there who might try to obstruct the introduction of that assisted dying bill? David Lammy is going to be the gift that keeps on giving. He is going to be an incredible entertainment when he gets to Prime Minister's questions, because he's going to have to do the one thing he's not good at, thinking on his feet. Now, I'd pay to go to watch that because I think it'll be an absolute road crash. I don't really understand why Starmer, who surely can see Lammy's limitations, has taken this step. Was he trying to be woke or right on? It wasn't a merit-based appointment, in my view, Mark.
Similarly, I thought it was very unfair that Liz Kendall had been removed from her position in welfare and social security, taking the heat, if you like, for that U-turn around those welfare cuts. Well, it was Keir Starmer's leadership. It was his decision to U-turn, and he landed her right in it. What he has done now is brought in a very safe pair of hands in Pat McFadden, who is known as being very, very firm, very, very brutal, albeit he does it in a very nice and calm way. So it'll be interesting to see whether he actually goes even further with cuts.
Yeah, you're right about Pat McFadden. It's almost like having a surrogate chancellor in a way, because, I mean, who really thinks Rachel Reeves is doing a good job there? But it adds up to this difficulty that Starmer's got, which is by trying to fix a problem, he could have made it worse for himself. I mean, how would you summarize this cabinet reshuffle overall, Mark?
But I guess overall, the reshuffle, the best that can be said for it, frankly, was that it covered up what had happened in terms of Angela Rayner. But where does it leave Starmer's premiership and where does it leave Angela Rayner? In a strange way, I think this. I think that after the local elections in 27, when Labour are going to get wiped out and Reform and the Lib Dems are going to do relatively well, they'll be calling then for Starmer to go. There'll be individuals recognising what I think we already know now, that this Prime Minister hasn't got what it takes to win Labour a second term. He's a one-term only Prime Minister, and they're going to need to change.
There's going to be a real back pressure in the Labour Party because they'll be getting worried about their own jobs in Parliament.
And it could just be that Angela Rayner may, having been away out of the front line for 2 years, be the person that the Labour Party believe has the charisma, has the forthright talking, has the bit of risk-taking that could take on Starmer. So you know what? It may be that not actually getting that stamp duty right could be the best thing that ever happened to Angela Rayner.
I don't think Angela Rayner's got the intellectual quality or indeed the education to do the job. Let's remember in the old days, when we were members of Parliament, Tony Blair went on about education, education, education. Actually, a line he stole from Lenin, but that's another story. We don't seem to have that view from the current Labour government. In fact, they're the worst educated cabinet in history.
Anyway, that's all from me. We look forward to hearing what Lembit has been up to at the Reform Conference.
I came away thinking this party's really gone leaps ahead. You may also remember, Mark, when we were in Parliament and when we were kings, we do a lot of fringe meetings, and those fringes, those other meetings being paid for, being sponsored by people who really want to influence the future of the country, they were all there, or a lot of them were anyway. Heathrow Airport was there, JCB, loads of big businesses who are clearly trying to get in on the policy making side at the moment. That's what I think is going on there. And the interesting thing about it is I actually did some very useful work, some good interaction on some things, including aviation policy. So this party is coming of age. And I can still see there's inexperience. Nigel Farage said after the conference that they still don't know a lot of things. And one reason Nadine Dorries recently defected and was welcomed by Nigel Farage is because she's been in government.
And I'm delighted that we're going to have the experience, the talent, the hard work and the loyalty of Nadine Dorries, and I'm proud to welcome her onto the stage now.
And I think that they do benefit by getting people who have been in government and being in Parliament as well. You should join us. Maybe you should join us as well.
In the meantime, goodbye, and tune in to the next episode of Lib Let Die. Thank you.
Goodbye.